So you want to be an Illium. So you want to have some pretty good mobility, while also being one of the best mobbing classes in the game. Then you've come to the right video. In the beginner tab, we have Shelter Return, which sends you back to Illium's hideout. At level 200, you can give you and people around you 4% attack and magic attack. They don't even have to be in your party, they just have to be in your map, or around you basically. And in first job, we get Radiant Javelin. Mine, of course, is the 4th job version, so it's going to have a little bit of extra properties. And then we also have Radiant Orb. So going over Radiant Javelin, it does 20% extra damage to normal enemies. It does 2 attacks to 4 enemies. The thing is that this is like Luminous's 4th job skill. It'll just bounce off of enemies. It's really nice. So I can like jump and attack and it'll bounce between enemies, it'll go up platforms, down platforms, it's really good. And if there's only 2 enemies to hit, it'll bounce between them. So really good mobbing, even in first job, still really good. So then we have Radiant Orb, which will only attack straight, but every time it attacks, it gives you a Lucent Brand. Only does 1 line as well. It's not really made for attacking, but you'll see why it's useful later on. So if you combine it with Javelin, Javelin will then gain, what was it, 10% extra damage? 15% extra damage. I did try macroing it, putting it on a macro here, but it seems to attack a lot more slowly than if I press them both individually. Alright. So then we have X, which is your first summon, and he'll just attack enemies, and every 10 attacks, the beam gets stronger. So there you go. Well, he didn't get to go to the 3rd phase, the 3rd part of it, but it's very strong. So next we have Crystalline Wings, which is your teleport. And if you, teleport on the ground... Oh wait, I think he's about to do it. There it is! Saw it for a little bit. So if you teleport on the ground, you can see that it's very quick. It doesn't go too far, but because of its speed, it's not that bad. The distance it travels up and down isn't too far as well. Like I can't teleport up there, but I can teleport right here. And if you are in the air and you hold it down, you can fly. You can also choose any direction to fly in, and you can do a single attack, I believe. You can use Javelin if you want to, like, just throw it out there. Or in second job, you can replace the orb. You can, like, reapply it somewhere. Alright, and I think... yeah, so, so here's a passive. Just hover over that so you can see. And then Lucent Brands. So every time you attack with the orb, you get 1 Lucent Brand. And what it does is it increases your attack power. Or magic attack in this case, because this is a magic attack class. But it mentions attack power because later on you can share it with your party. But per stack, you get 2 attack power. Moving on to second job. Crystal Battery, which is the, jewel that you see here, the little orb. It'll tell you that it can only have a max charge of 30. And that every time you attack with the Javelin, if the Javelin hits it, you gain 1 stack to the crystal, or orb, or whatever. And then if you attack with the Radiant Orb, it gives you two stacks. And the skills that you saw just happen when I hit them with that are the reaction skills. I should also mention that when the... I'm going to just keep calling it an orb, even though one of the attacks is literally called Radiant Orb. So every time your orb hits the max stacks, so in this case it would be 30, it'll only stay maxed out for 10 seconds before resetting back down to 0. So the reaction skills. If I attack with Javelin, or later on the Spear, it'll activate the reaction skill Destruction. And you can't just continuously activate it. In second job it has a 6-second cooldown, but mine is the 4th job, or 3rd job version, so it has a 4-second cooldown before it can do it again. You'll also only have the first explosion, the green one. So that green explosion is the one that you'll see, the blue one is a third job skill. And then the other one is Domination. And this will activate when you use the Radiant Orb on it. That one isn't really used for mobbing per se, it's mainly to activate Umbral Brands, which is the purple brands you see above the enemy's heads. Alright, so next we have, I'll just hover over it so you can see what the attack does. So next we have your first crystal skill. Should I just call it a crystal instead of an orb? Well, anyway, so this will only activate after you reach the crystal charge of 30. As you can see, it needs to have a 30 charge. So the skill will be grayed out, you can see it down here, until you reach the appropriate amount of stacks, which is 30. And once you use it, it'll do like this spinning... Well, you'll see. It's basically a great mobbing skill. It also helps in bossing. Here, let me get to 30 stacks. Alright, let me just keep using this. Okay, so now we're at 30, and you can see that I can now use the skill. So I'm going to put it up here, and when I activate it, it just like spins in place and does a lot of damage to the enemies around it. Alright, so next we have Gauntlet Frenzy, which increases your attack speed by 2. We have Machina, your second summon, which will only stay around the orb, but for enemies that are around the orb, they'll be sucked into it, or at least closer to it. What was it? Oh, and then every time you move the orb itself, he also does damage. So he'll do like a one-hit attack, basically, as you move the orb. So you could honestly, if you're funded enough, just move the orb around and kill enemies that way. Next we have Aegis of Light, which for every... I shouldn't word it like that. So when you get a Lucent Brand, you know how it gives you attack and stuff? So when you get hit, it takes a Lucent Brand, but it gives you... it reduces the damage you take by 60%. So let's see, when you're hit, one Lucent Brand will absorb 60% damage. So it's basically your magic guard. Which means you have to constantly be attacking in order to, you know, keep your damage lowered. Or the damage you take lowered. And then finally we have Umbral Brand. And for every stack of Umbral Brand, you lower the enemy defense by 4%. Illium's attacks will do 20% bonus damage on Umbral Branded enemies. So I forgot to mention, but if you use Deploy Crystal, the orb will move in front of you, or whatever direction you're facing, a certain distance. So whether you're on the ground or in the air, if you turn around, it'll like move a set distance from you. However, if you want to teleport it in front of you, or right on top of you, you hold down, and then you press Deploy Crystal, and it'll just go to where you are. Just like that. And I believe that is it for second job. Next we move on to third job. So now the battery can hold 150 energy, or charges. Same thing applies, Javelin still only gives 1, Orb gives 2, but now the reaction skills are better. So the reaction you've been seeing is the one that, you know, you get this time. And they have like bonus effects, kind of. Or they get like more lines or more damage. So, Destruction now gains 20% bust damage. Not only that, but it gains, you know, 2 attacks instead of just 1. So now it goes green and then turns into a bigger blue explosion. And then for Domination, instead of only doing 1 line, it now does 2 lines. Pretty much everything else is the same aside from the damage though. Oh, and like I said, the cooldown is reduced to 4 seconds instead of just 6. And then we have Wings of Glory, which I can't actually get to right now unless I continuously attack the thing, but I'll show that later on. So when you reach 150 stacks or charges on your crystal battery, then your like whole screen becomes this like greenish thing, and then you can also fly around. I'll show it right after I explain it, I guess. So when you activate Wings of Glory, it lasts 20 seconds, and it gives you a lot of bonuses. It gives you 10% damage, 100% knockback resistance, 30% damage, and Javelin gets stronger. It does like an explosion, and then hits 5 enemies 6 times. So it's very strong. And let me just charge my crystal so I can show you what that looks like. Alright, so I'm about to hit 150 charges, and show you Wings of Glory. So as you can see, the screen becomes really cool, and when you activate Wings of Glory, the music changes, and your attacks are now, or Javelin specifically, now does like a big explosion doing damage to enemies around the one you hit. So very cool. You can also teleport while you're flying around in Wings of Glory, giving you probably the best mobility in the game. But again, it only lasts 20 seconds. So that was Wings of Glory. Next we have another crystal skill, Resonance, which you can only use after your battery charge has reached 60. So right now I'm back to 0 because, you know, I hit the 150 and then it went back down to 0. So let me get to 60, and then I'll show you that skill. Okay, so now that I'm at 60 stacks, I can now activate Resonance, which heals you and any party members in between you and the orb, and applies an Umbral stack to the enemies that are in between you for every pulse that it gives. So it's good to like move the enemies between you and the orb so that every pulse gives them an Umbral stack. But you're also being healed, and I believe your party members get healed as well. Oh yeah, it does say party members as well. It'll also give a Lucent Brand to your party members, so that's good. Gives them attack power and magic attack for every stack. Speaking of Lucent Brand, so from stacks 1 to 3, you gain 2 attack power per stack. So, you know, stack 1 is 2, stack 2 is 4, stack 3 is 6, and then once you hit 4 stacks, it starts going up by 4. So at 4 stacks, you get 10, because plus 4 to 6. And anyway, you get the idea. Umbral. Oh, is there anything else? Okay, so Umbral brands also get an increase. So for the first stack, it's -1 or -4% defense, and then 2 and 3 stacks is another 4% or 8% once you get to 3. Well, technically when you're at 3 you get 12, but whatever. You get the idea, right? It's the same thing, except that it lowers defense to enemies. So remember before it inflicted 20% bonus damage against Umbral enemies? Well, now it gives 30%. The bonus hits damage is multiplied up to 3 times based on the number of stacks. So yeah, you just do more damage. Basically. And then we get some passives. So there you go. Some good passives. Alright. Oh, and as you can see, I haven't used Vortex Wings yet, which means, you know, I can use it as long as I'm above 30 charges. But anyway, 4th job. So now, same thing applies, only 150 charges. Orb gives 2, Javelin gives 1, but your new skill, Longinus Spear, gives 3 charges. Javelin gets an upgrade. Now every time you hit an enemy, it puts these like little missiles. Okay, that was supposed to hit that guy. So it sends out these little extra missiles to hit enemies. So it's just a stronger version of it. Radiant Orb also gets an upgrade. So now it increases Radiant Javelin's damage by 30% instead of 15. And of course it does more damage. Still only 1 line though. So Longinus Spear. This will pretty much only attack in a straight line, but it depends on where the orb is. So let me go ahead and summon the orb. Alright, so if the orb is right up there, it'll only aim at the orb, and then when it hits the orb, it will activate the reaction skill Destruction. Has a pretty short cooldown, I think it's only like 10 seconds, 15 seconds, and does a lot of damage. So if I put the orb right there, throw the spear, and it'll just hit all those enemies. And like I said, if the orb's not summoned, it'll only go straight. Or if you're using Wings of Glory, it'll only go straight. Next we have another summon, or another crystal skill, which is another summon. And it combines both Machina and X to create Deus. And let me actually charge up my crystal so that I can summon him. So I guess while I'm charging, I'll explain what he does. So you won't have X or Machina, but Deus will activate kind of like the same attacks, where he doesn't pull enemies, but he does a lot of damage to enemies. And then the beams that X does, he can also do against more enemies. So it looks like I can summon him now. So let's do that. So no longer will he follow the orb, he only follows you. But as you can see, he summons those beams on more enemies. And he does some pretty good damage as well, like by himself. But I guess the extra satellites, is what they call them, are a nice bonus. So you basically summon a bunch of little X's, and then Machina is just stronger. That's basically what the skill is. So yeah. He's just an upgrade to both of them. Alright, let's see. Oh, and you can only summon him after you reach 90 charges in your orb. Alright, blah blah blah, what do we got? Vortex Wings. So you can only use this when you are using Wings of Glory. And once you activate Vortex Wings, it's like a big AoE attack. It'll pretty much hit from where I am, the top row, the middle row, and the bottom row. And it does a lot of damage. It does 2,008 times. So it does 2,000% damage 8 times. But you can only use it once per Wings of Glory. And then another Wings of Glory thing. So with this activated, when you're in Wings of Glory, enemies around you will automatically gain stacks on Umbral brands, and your party members will gain Lucent brands. So it's basically a buff to go into this form. Hero of Flora gives you and your party members 15% all stats. Floran Hero's Will is pretty much like regular Hero's Will. Is like regular Hero's Will. Which gets rid of abnormal status and leaves you immune to abnormal status for 3 seconds. Flash Crystal Battery, when you activate it, charges will now charge twice the amount. So Javelin only charges 1 normally, but if I activate the battery skill, then now it'll charge 2, Orb will charge 4, and I'm gonna just call it a spear. Will charge 6. Because remember, it only said 1, 2, and 3. Now it's 2, 4, and 6. But only while it's activated, and I believe it only stays active for 10 seconds. Cooldown's 2 minutes though, so not too long, I guess. And then Lucent Brand gets its final upgrade. I don't think I have to explain this, I already did before. Umbral Brands also get an upgrade. And now you do 40% extra damage, and then 5 times based on the number of stacks, and then a passive. So let's move on to the active hypers. I put into all Javelin, because Javelin's your main attack basically. So I increase the damage, boss damage, and number of lines it does by 1. I also increased Deus's damage, and increase its number of lines by 1 for itself and the satellites. The spear, I don't really use the spear all that much, so I didn't really put into anything. And then, yeah, I didn't have enough points for the boss damage of Deus. Alright, so next we move on to the active hypers. Crystalline Bulwark. Okay. So per Lucent Brand, you get 1 second of invincibility. So if you get to, the max, which is 10, then you have 10 seconds of invincibility. This also works on party members that are near you. So if I activate it, there should be a crystal going around my character, but for some reason they took that animation out. So yeah, you and your party can gain invincibility. And then Longinus Zone, which is a pretty good AoE, has a very big range on it. Does 4 lines per like the attack, and then it explodes at the end, doing... Oh no, it's 3 lines per attack, and then the explosion does 4 lines. You're also invincible while casting it, and the cooldown's only 2 minutes. And then of course you get, at level 200, a 10% damage buff to you and any other flora in your party. Right now, Illium's the only flora, but we do have Arc coming up next month. So yeah, that is it. Let's go over the mobbing. Mobbing, very easy, very good. It's just throw out the orb, throw out the javelin, and then if you want, you can also, depending on where you place it, you could throw the spear and like hit multiple enemies up there. But for the most part, you just want to manage where your orb is going, so that your attacks will go there as well. You can also use the orb to reach higher areas. So if I had the orb, I don't know, yeah, let me go to a spot. So I think from here, okay, so it can reach the top. Ooh, and then, oh my god, Wings of Glory, so good for mobbing. Oh, I never got to show this actually. Where is it? Here we go, Vortex Wings. So when you activate it, it's pretty much almost the whole screen, with a lot of damage. And yeah, that's pretty much Wings of Glory. But anyway, I think that's enough of the mobbing, right? I mean, I could mob with this class all day. It's so fun to mob with, because everything dies, and I love it. But yeah, I think that's enough. Goodness, this class, so fun to mob with. Okay. No, I'm gonna go to bossing now before this video becomes like 40 minutes. Oh my goodness, I love this class. When it comes to mobbing, anyway. Alright, so let's move on to the bossing. No, but really, this class is so fun for mobbing. Love it. Okay, bossing. Alright, so Illium's bossing, for me at least, what I do is I start off with, you know, throwing the orb. For the Wings of Glory, I usually don't activate it when bossing. What I do instead is activate Vortex Wings, and then cancel Wings of Glory. Because Vortex Wings is, you know, a strong enough attack that I think it's worth using. And then after I use it, I just go back to using Orb and Javelin. Although Orb doesn't want to come out for some reason. There we go. And then if I need to, I activate the 150 Hyper, maybe the 170 Hyper, the first job, like, swirly attack, because it still does a lot of damage. And throw the spear, and yeah, it's pretty much bossing. I really don't know what else to say. The bossing's kind of lackluster, but you know, once you get used to it, I'm sure it'll be better. And there's DR, so we can't attack. But I am going to summon my Deus, because he does a lot of damage. And yeah, it's pretty much Illium's bossing. By the way, I'm only using the Umber weapon, because I felt like I didn't need to get it a Fafnir weapon because his mobbing is so good already. But maybe when I go over 5th job skills, I'll have a Fafnir weapon. Oh, and here's Wings of Glory again. So, if there's any Illium mains out there, please let me know if Wings of Glory is worth using. Because I really don't know if it is. Maybe it is a strong attack. I don't know. I just didn't find it to be as strong as using Javelin with the orb. Did I ever mention that you could teleport while doing it? While using Wings of Glory? I feel like I've forgotten so much. Well, anyway. Hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.